Cruise ship employees, or crew, are without a doubt an essential part of the cruise ship industry. Some might even argue that they are the most important piece of your dream vacation at sea. After all, they are responsible for doing things like cooking all the food that you eat, giving you that Swedish massage, and making sure that you have a freshly folded animal towel in your cabin every day during your sailing. Most crew members working on board cruise ships work literally every single day throughout their contract, and during those days they can work up to 10 to 12-hour shifts, all in an effort to give you the experience of a lifetime. Now, during that time, you gotta wonder, with such a heavy workload, how much these crew members have to be making as far as money. Well, you're in luck, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about here in today's video. Now, before we dive into the numbers, because I'm assuming that's why most of you, if not all of you, are watching this video, there are a couple things that we absolutely have to take into consideration when we're answering the big question of how much money crew members make. As somebody that's worked for cruise lines like Carnival and NCL, I can tell you that there is a massive gap between the highest paid and the lowest paid crew member on any individual ship. There's also major factors that you have to take into consideration, like the cruise line the crew member might be working for, their country of origin, where they're living, their position on board, and how long they've been working on board cruise ships. There are other factors, but we're just going to leave it at those for now. Actually, I lied. I absolutely have to throw in negotiating skills as well. Personally, I consider that to be $1 million skill. You negotiate how much money you're going to get paid for your contract, as well as many potential benefits you might also receive during your contract. Now, before we get into this, guys, just one more little thing I got to put out there. Just a teeny tiny disclaimer. Just understand this video is, for the most part, for entertainment purposes only. And everything that I say in this video is not across the board for every single crew member. There are factors, like I just mentioned, and you also got to understand that there could potentially be two crew members that are in the same position that are getting different pay. Also, toward the end of the video, I'm going to show you my contract and how much I was getting paid. I still have it around here somewhere. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the numbers. So first, let's start off with the world's most reputable and reliable source for information, the internet. So I typed in how much money do cruise ship employees make, and obviously I got a ton of results. But I landed on a link from Indeed.com, and honestly, it did not disappoint. So according to Indeed.com, onboard cruise ships, food workers, for example, make just under $22,000 a year, deckhands about $25,000 a year, entertainers on board cruise ships $30,000 a year, and the captain can make up to $87,000 per year. Next, I just so happened to drift over to a Business Insider article that interviewed 35 current and former cruise ship employees back in 2019. Now, 2019, that was about 3 or 4 years ago, depending on when you're watching this video. Either way, just understand that this was before the pandemic, when the world was somewhat normal. Now, out of these 35 current and former employees, they concluded that they were making anywhere between $500 and $10,000 per month. But it gets even crazier. Out of those 35, they learned that 40% of them were making less than $2,000 per month. But before we go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into those numbers, there's one thing that I need you guys to understand, that these numbers, there's something wrong with them. They lack context and details, things that you should really be focused on and understand if you really want to understand how much cruise ship employees make. So for starters, when it comes to that Indeed article talking about the potential salaries of crew members, from the deckhands to the entertainers to even the captain, well, there's already a problem there, because most of the crew on board are not salaried. They are not making an annual income because they are contractors. Usually they work contracts in the range of 6 to 9 months, sometimes 3 in the event that somebody unfortunately has gotten fired or a crew member has to leave early. The only people that could potentially be making annual income working on board cruise ships would be somebody like the captain or the officers. However, I'll talk about that later on in the video. Now, there is also something I want to point out. You remember those factors I talked about? Well, one in particular is something we should really be focused on, and that is everyone's country of residence. It plays a massive part into how much crew members are paid that work on board cruise ships. So to best explain this situation, I want to give all of you an example. I'm sure at some point all of you have heard that some crew members out there are getting paid as low as $500 a month. Now, depending on who you heard this from, what they probably didn't tell you is that that crew member lives in a place to which the currency they are being paid is worth potentially a lot more than the currency that they use over in that specific country, the country that they live in. So let's say we have a cruise ship sailing out of the United States that is paying every single crew member working on board that specific ship USD or American dollars. We also just so happen to have a Filipino worker on board that is getting USD, or if anything, the equivalent in their type of currency of the country in which they reside in. That's typically how these situations go. Now, at the time of this recording, $1 is the equivalent of 51 Filipino pesos. You take that and go to 500 USD, you now have 25,000 Filipino pesos. Now, let's take that 25,000 and let's compare it to the average cost of living in the second largest city over in the Philippines, Manila, which is a beautiful city, by the way. But over in Manila, a family typically costs around 28,000 Filipino pesos. Now, just looking at this, and this came from, I think it was 2019 or something like that, but either way, you got to remember this is the second largest city over in the Philippines, probably one of the most expensive, and we could assume that a lot of the crew members aren't just living in a place like Manila. There are places that are a lot cheaper. This is like comparing, let's say, the cost of living to an LA or New York City to Wichita, Kansas. I think you get where I'm going with all of this. By the way, I probably should have reminded all of you during that long explanation that all of this is on a month-by-month basis. If a crew member that is from the Philippines, for example, was making 500 USD or 25,000 Filipino pesos each month, you can kind of track it and see where it goes. Now, another thing that I want to point out as far as a crew member potentially making just $500 per month, you also got to take into the equation that they could have a job on board that is similar to US viewers, like a waiter job or a bartending job, where that person is making tips, because tips are very big and appreciated, by the way, for the crew members on board cruise ships. Now, let's say if a crew member is making at times, let's say $1,500 a month, they could potentially have deductions as well on things like their room and board, which is rare, but I have known crew members that had to pay things basically similar to a rent on board in order to stay there. Now, before I show all of you what I made during one of my contracts, I do want to try my best to make all of this kind of simple for you. When it comes to what crew members are making on board cruise ships, there is no set amount by any means as far as what each individual crew member is making. But typically, if they are paying people as far as the cruise lines on the lower scale, they usually kind of look and adhere to whatever the national average is of each country in which each crew member resides from. So for example, if they're paying people on a lower scale, if you're in a position, maybe it's your first contract or couple contracts, and you are a room steward, you're a waiter, you're a bartender, anything of that nature, or you're working in the galley, then you could be making whatever that lower amount is for the national average, especially if you're coming from some place like a developing country, some parts of the Philippines, South America, parts of Africa, places of those nature. I think you guys get what I mean. Now, when it comes to the entertainment, for example, one thing I got to point out is that typically when you go on board cruise ships, the entertainment is typically from places like the United States, someplace over in the UK, Europe, or over in Australia. That's typically what I've kind of gathered as far as working from cruise ships, and they could make anywhere from $2,000 a month up to $5,000 per month. However, there are exceptions. I've worked with people that are making a lot more depending on the position and show that they're doing on board. Now, as far as like the captain and the officers, it does range greatly depending on the cruise line that they are, of course, operating and the ships that they are sailing and all those other things. However, a captain can make anywhere easily between $50,000 and $100,000 per year. Now, just keep in mind, when it comes to those positions, they are the ones that are typically salaried if that option is available to them. And also, in order to do all of this, they do have to kind of start at the bottom. Some of them are deckhands. They also have to go to a maritime school. Now, this is what I was saying earlier when it comes to crew members. Most of them are just working 6 to 9 month contracts with no benefits whatsoever. However, the captain and the officers, on the other hand, they do have a little bit of an advantage, mainly because they went to school for this stuff, and obviously it's kind of slim pickings. Not everybody can just up and decide they want to be a cruise ship officer or a captain one day. Now, as we conclude, I do want to show all of you what I made during my NCO contract. Just keep in mind that I only worked one NCO contract. It was a 6-month contract, and during that time, I was performing in a Broadway show known as After Midnight, and I was a principal character, meaning I was one of the main characters. So during the rehearsal process, which went on for just over a month, I was paid $2,400 each month. However, when I got on board the ship and I was actually performing, even though I was only working like literally 2 days out of the week, we were getting paid about $3,700. Now, I can tell you straight up that depending on the position is a major factor. I had a friend of mine that was making about $9,000 a month. So you can see what I'm talking about. Just because we were all in the same show doesn't mean we're all in the same position. Some people negotiate better. Some people just make better pay because they've probably done more than one contract. Actually, I remember there were people that were in my show that were on their 5th contract during that same show. But you get where I'm going with this. But anyway, guys, as we conclude, I just want to go ahead and state that there is no such thing as an across-the-board, straightforward, cut-and-dry answer when it comes to how much money cruise ship employees can make while working on board during their contracts. Anyway, I hope you guys got some type of value out of this. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video. That way more people can see it. It goes a very long way in supporting my channel. Oh yeah, and also comment. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I do read every single comment, and I'll be sure to try to reply to at least most of them. I appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.